Welcome to Good Spirit Graphics. In this tutorial, we're going to track a hand holding a pencil in Mocha. In Cinema 4D, we'll convert that track into 3D motion, which we'll use to control a polygon vertex. Okay, let's get started. This tutorial contains the following sections: tracking the hand in Mocha, aligning the rig, and linking the tracking data. Now, the first thing you should do in Mocha whenever you're getting ready to track a plane is to determine what kind of motion you have on that plane. Now, we have a hand moving through the shot holding a pencil, and you'll see it stays mostly parallel to the camera image plane. There's a little bit of rotation, especially right in here. You can see the hand is rotating a little bit. So we have an option at this point of tracking either with just translation, scale, and rotation and using MochaBlend's 2.5D solver, or tracking with everything, including shear and perspective. In that case, we'll need MochaBlend's 3D solver. Now, to save time, I've already tracked this shot, so let's take a look at both tracks that I've done. One says 2.5D, that's because this one was tracked with only translation, scale, and rotation. Now, if we scrub through the shot, what we want to look at is this blue surface area right here. And you'll see if we zoom in a little bit, you'll see the blue surface area drifts off the pencil tip. Now, you may be tempted to try to fix this in MochaBlend's Adjust Track module. However, trying to move the four corners of the blue surface area around with no reference points around the pencil tip will destroy your solve in MochaBlend. You'll probably change a usable solve into incorrect 3D motion, or into a complete mess as shown here. There are several ways to correct this drift, and we'll look at a simple solution in part 2 of this tutorial. For this shot, we're going to skip forward and take a look at our 3D track. Our 3D track here used translation, scale, rotation, shear, and perspective. Now let's take a look at this track and see if it did a better job. Now, it looks like the blue surface area is sticking very nicely right on that pencil tip. I didn't add any keyframes to it, so right out of the box we have a workable track. Let's go ahead and export this track by clicking on Export Tracking Data, selecting the MochaBlend Tracking Data Exporter, and copying to the system clipboard. In Cinema 4D, we're going to paste that data into MochaBlend. It's going to go in this blue slot here, number 1, and you'll see we need to create a rig. Then we'll set the timeline to match the Mocha data. And let's go ahead and grab the image sequence we tracked in Mocha, grab the first frame, and drop it in our little view area here. Now let's go to the Camera Rig tab and set the transparency down to 0 for right now. And if we move through the shot, we should see our footage synced up. There we go. Now the next thing we can do is create a transform null. We have two types we can create here. On the Solve tab, we tracked this one in 3D, but if you see on the 2.5D solve, we're showing a quality of 55%. Now, that's not bad considering we tracked this with perspective in Mocha. This is probably very usable. Let's go ahead and look at the 3D track, and then we'll come back and compare it to this. Now, on the 3D track, you'll see that we have a frame number that popped up, frame 77. That's because if we go back to Mocha, you'll see that I adjusted the blue surface area here to fit right around the pencil tip by only dragging the edges and not the corners. That maintains a perfect rectangle for the surface. If you don't see that frame number in MochaBlend, then you can fix that simply by clicking on this button here, Align Selected Surface. That will push the blue surface area to the edges of your footage. Then you can grab it and adjust only the edges, center it over the area that you want to export like this, always grabbing only the edges and not the corners. Then when MochaBlend gets the data, it will recognize the frame that you adjusted that surface area on. Now you can zoom in and adjust that a little more accurately. For now, I just want to show you how to set that frame number in MochaBlend. Back in Cinema 4D, let's go ahead and create a solve. Now this looks like a pretty good solve here. Let's open up the little graph, and you'll see this doesn't look too good. That's because we're zoomed way in. Let's actually return it to a normal scale setting, and you'll see that everything fits within 1 pixel. So we have a good track here. Now let's go ahead and create a transform null with it. And if we analyze the shape, we'll see this looks like plausible motion for our hand. If we look inside the rig cam, you can see that that null is tracking the pencil tip nicely. You can see it better actually if we deselect the null, so we can see if it's actually matching the pencil tip. Looks pretty good. Now let's go ahead and get out of camera view and let's look again at our path. Now this is our 3D path. Now let's go ahead and switch to the 2.5D solver, and with our 55% quality, which is pretty good for perspective being in the shot, let's go ahead and apply this solve to that existing transform by clicking the apply button. And you'll see this doesn't differ too much from the original solve. So because this looks a little smoother to me, I'm going to go ahead and use this solve here. Now let's control something with this 3D track. Let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit here and move our scene over. Now we're going to create a cube for this shot, and temporarily let's go ahead and grab our rig and just move it out of the way. Let's go ahead and create a cube like this. Let's scale it up a little bit here. And then we want to place it right on the ground plane. We can do that more easily if we move into the quad view here and look at the right view and move it up so it's sitting right on the ground plane. There we go. Now next, we want to take our cube and we want to make it editable. So let's click on this button here and then click on Point Edit Mode. You'll see now we get access to the individual points in our cube. So we want to align our rig to a particular point. Now how do we do that? We select the object where we want to move to and click on Store Transform. Then all we do is click on Align Rig. MochaBlend will then align our rig to that particular point. Now we'll be able to see this better if we go back to the Camera Rig tab and change the transparency settings here so we can see through our cube. And you'll see our rig movie screen is placed right on that point. Now if we go to the frame where we want to start our shot, which is the start of our data on frame 77, let's go ahead and go to that start frame and then take a look at our transform. Now our transform is not on that point. So aligning our rig to that point is not really what we want. What we want to do is on frame 77, place that frame of the transform data, which if you zoom in, you'll see there is a keyframe here right on that spot. We want to transform our rig so it is sitting on that point for this frame. So all we do is make sure we have the child of the rig selected and click on, once again, Align Rig. Now MochaBlend will move the rig so that particular keyframe is right on the point where you want it. The next thing we're going to do is attach that point or cube vertex to our transform here and make it follow our 3D solve. So we're going to do that in Cinema 4D by using an espresso tag. So let's select our cube and go ahead and right click and select a Cinema 4D tag and put espresso as our tag type. Now that opens up our espresso editor here, and you'll see what we need to do is create some nodes. So let's right click and select New Node Espresso, General, and we'll select Object. Now let's go ahead and take a look at this. It says Cube, that's fine. Now on our cube, what we want to do is access individual vertices. So the next thing we're going to need here is also a point node. So let's go to General and select Point. Now on Point, what we can do is connect our cube node here by clicking on the output and selecting an object output. Let's go ahead and connect that object to object here, and you'll see now we have access to points that are part of that cube. Now it looks like we need another input here, a point index. Now how do we get the point index that we need for that particular vertex? Well, let's go back to the view here and let's zoom out a little bit. Now also our movie screen isn't going to sit here for our final shot, so let's go ahead and click on this button here. but we don't really want it behind it because we want to look through it. So let's select the distance value here. And if we drag down here, you can see we can move our movie screen anywhere we want. Let's go ahead and stick it back to about -1000 like this. And if you select the 3D transform, you'll see it is fully in front of it. Now if we look through our movie screen, everything's still going to line up perfectly because MochaBlend adjusts everything for you. Now back on frame 77, let's go ahead and take a look at our cube. With our cube selected, let's go ahead and see that we can select different vertices on here. Now, how do we know what the index number is for these vertices? Well, we do that by going to the structure viewer here, and you'll see that if we click on these, we are actually selecting different vertices. Now we want this one here, which looks like it has index value 1. So if we go back to the Espresso editor and create a new node, this time let's create a constant node. So let's go ahead and change this to an integer by going to the Attribute tab, and we'll change this to integer. It actually works either way for this, but I like to use the correct data type, and then we'll set the value to 1. Now if we connect the index point here to that constant, we now have access to that particular vertex of the cube. Now to make it follow our transform, what we want to do is take a look at our transform here and create another node. We'll select Espresso again and create another object node. This time we want to grab the reference arrow here and click on our transform here. Now we have a node for our transform, and if we take a look at the outputs, we get some choices here. We can select global position. Now we also need an input here, so let's click on point position. Now let's connect these two nodes together like this. If we did everything correctly, we should be able to go back to the view and then move our timeline here, and you should see that vertex following the path. Now let's go ahead and look through the camera. We'll also deselect our transform so our path doesn't get in the way. And let's go ahead and give our cube a little bit of color so we can see it better. I think red is going to show up a little bit better for this example here with a blue screen. There we go. Maybe a little darker actually. Let's darken it up. Okay, now if we scrub our timeline now, you should see a convincing illusion of our pencil tip grabbing that vertex of the cube. Let's go ahead and deselect our cube actually also to get rid of those lines. There we go. This looks pretty good. It looks like our pencil is reaching in, and actually we can control that a little bit better by changing our start frame here to 1, which is actually where our video starts. And if we back all the way up, you'll see our pencil tip reaches in, grabs that little point of the cube, and starts manipulating it around. Now, I think we could also go to display constant shading lines, and then we won't have all the lighting effects inside Cinema 4D that we don't want. We can go ahead and move our transparency settings here also so we can just barely see our hand. We can turn off visibility of our transform. We don't really need to see it anymore. Now, if you don't want it to actually move out of the scene and drag that point with it, let's just go to that point where we want to drop it. Let's see, right about here. And let's go to our Espresso tag. And you'll see we have an enable button. So if we click on Alt and add a keyframe here, and then maybe on the very next frame, let's go ahead and turn it off and keyframe it. You'll see what we've done is we have let go of that point right on that frame. In part 2, we're going to put the whole shot together, including real 3D shadows generated from Mocha Roto. We'll also create ghost shadows that aren't even in the original video.